Hey everyone, welcome to Real Mob Stories. This is your host, James Proctor. And today I have a special guest with us. And welcome to the show, Billy Luna. How are
Thank you
you?
so much, James. Wonderful to be here with you, as always.
Yes, thanks for joining. I always like to have guests come on and especially, other content creators. I want to be able to help them out and be able to help get their stuff out. And you've always been great to work with, and always like having you come on. And there's a few others like you, but I really enjoy whenever you come on the show. So thank you for taking the time.
Absolutely, man. I enjoy it too.
So the reason I was bringing you on is, there's a lot going on with Joey Merlino, and I I watched that 3-part documentary, The Mob Wars, Philadelphia versus Mafia. And I noticed that yesterday that you put up a show, and it was basically the first half of it was you were doing a reaction video to the 3-part series, and then the second part of the video you actually was you added a lot of more context to what was missing from the documentary, and I thought it was excellently done. I mean, you're probably the best when it comes to the production quality of your videos, and I thought you did great with it.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, I just I that's what I was exactly what you just articulated. It was like I wanted to do a reaction and kind of a review breakdown, and then I thought there was some stuff that was missing, and I thought I can probably do this better, and that was my goal. That I wanted to kind of fill in the blanks and do something that wasn't provided by Netflix.
Yeah, very, very true. And so, for me, I watched it. I didn't even have Netflix, and so I ended up purchasing it. My understanding is we talked before the show. You actually saw the show a couple of weeks ago on in a special viewing, and so how did that take place?
Well, it was I have some connections. I live here in LA, so I have I was aware of the genesis of the whole thing a long time ago. And when I found out about it, I called Joey Merlino, and I explained it all to him. He had When I did call him, someone had just actually told him previous to me calling him, because someone from Netflix reached out to one of his people. And so I have these connects, so they've set up this screening for me. And as I mentioned, I was kind of sworn to secrecy, and I couldn't release anything on it, and the uh the debut on Netflix day before yesterday. So I held off, or 2 days ago. Yeah. And yeah, so that was it. That's kind of cool. In LA you get a lot of screenings of things, and you kind of hook up with that. And obviously this one I was way more interested in. And yeah, but Joey, of course, does not kind of really associate with these type of projects. So it was done without his consent or his participation.
My thought on episode 1 was, and again, that one was called Head of the Snake. And so I thought that they didn't do a good job. I thought it was very incomplete. For example, STAN-fah, they just kind of said, "Oh, the commission brought him in as the boss," and that's not really how it happened. And actually, he came over to Philly from the Gambinos. It was a favor between Carlo Gambino and Angelo Bruno back in the mid 70s, when he came over from Sicily, talking about STAN-fah. And they gave him a place with the Philly mob. And we know that when Bruno was killed, that the driver that night was STAN-fah, but they didn't go into anything like that. They didn't talk about when he was kind of on the lam, because the DA was wanting him to testify. He wasn't willing to testify on what he saw, and he ends up in Baltimore working at a pizzeria for a while, and then eventually he gets arrested and I think put in prison for a couple of years just for contempt of court for not talking. And so, obviously he wasn't from Philly and he was an outsider, but there was more to his story. I just felt they didn't really do a good job of building that up. I don't know what your thoughts were.
I mean, they did nothing. I mean, they missed
Yeah.
so much. I mean, actually, to be honest with you, we talk about how they it seems like they missed more than they included. I mean, it was just huge gaps. Like as you just mentioned, I mean, in a very simple sense, there's a lot to talk about. And I mean, you sometimes you have to decide what you're going to focus on. However, just the idea that he was backed by the Gambinos, that's just one sentence they could have thrown in, but they didn't. And I mean, that's like, and it's like you think like a streamer like Netflix, it's kind of in their enlightened self-interest to like, I mean, why is it only 3 episodes? Because it could be more, and or maybe there's going to be a prequel and a post thing. But I mean, like all the things you just articulated are fascinating. I mean, but then I guess you do have to decide the scope. And for instance, you had touched on the assassination of Angelo Bruno, and that was kind of one of the main players, and that was Caponegro, Anthony Caponegro. And that's a very, I mean, there's so much stuff with this that there's a gray area. We don't know. So there's kind of room for interpretation. And it's like, was Stanfa in on it? Stanfa was apparently that night when Bruno was shot in the back of the head, he caught some buckshot apparently. And and we don't really know who did it. I mean, there's a lot of popular rumors, one of which is that it was actually Anthony Caponegro himself with the shotgun, which is, it's rare. I think with that would have been pretty outrageous for the underboss to be wielding a shotgun in the street. I don't know.
Yeah, I felt that those were some of the details, and think of it like World War II, for example. If you have FDR, he's president of the U.S. Then you have Hitler, you have Mussolini, you have whenever you build up these leaders for a documentary, you need to at least give a little bit of their backstory, and they did a poor job when it came to John Stanfa, in my opinion.
Right. And they, like you said, also you touched on, they need to really emphasize the interloper aspect of who he is to really kind of frame it among, these second generation mafia princes who this is their birthright essentially. And they've been usurped by an interloper, a foreign born interloper essentially. That's important.
Very important. And then, the other part that, I had some issue with was in this first episode, well, actually throughout the 3 episodes, they had John Alide is kind of, I don't even know why he was part of this. I guess his role was, some sort of former gangster that would give some sort of commentary, I guess is what they're trying to do. But why in the world would they bring him on? He's not. I know he supposedly did a little bit with Philly, maybe for a year, going by John Aledo or something. But the guy was nothing in Philly, and I don't know why they had him on.
Yeah, that's somewhat emblematic of where they're scraping for this thing. I mean, you don't get the participation. Obviously, the star of the show is skinny Joey Merlino, because why do we know this? His face is all over the poster. I mean, so he's how you're marketing it. Yet you don't get his participation in any way. You don't get his he didn't sign off in any way, shape, or form. And so, I mean, you think you might try to get some close to him. And I guess that, they had a couple guys like Angelo, like Lutz and Georgie Monorano, and that kind of gets close. But that's one of the reasons with the documentary that the mashup I made in my thing. It's like, my thing's like an hour long. I really wanted to make sure that we get into Joey's head and we hear Joey's words, because that is a voice that is sorely missing from this project. You're using the guy's face to market it, but there's just zero of him, So that's one of the reasons I really wanted to, in the thing I did, I want to get you Joey's perspective and kind of use his, show you what he had to say.
Yeah. And then they had a woman on there, and what was strange, and I always hate it when they do this. They said she was Philly mob or a mob associate, and
right.
You don't have women associates, but who was the woman? I guess it's Ralph Natalie's girlfriend or ex-girlfriend or something.
They're friendly. I mean, because I in my little thing, I used a photo of her when the only photo I really used of her was her sitting at a bar with Ralph Natali. And
Mm.
that's so she told the story in the thing about how Joey's a thief and that she said his guys would go to sleep and he would rifle through their pockets, take their money and wake up and whatever. And it's like, it's just so like, that doesn't seem very like, it's just like she didn't seem very credible. She seemed very subjective. It seems like she had an axe to grind. And obviously, if she rolled with Ralph Natali, that is someone that, he and Joey were deadly enemies essentially in the end.
Yeah, and how would she know anything like that? And also, one thing about Joey Merlino is that he goes back a long ways with his friends, and so I wouldn't see him, stealing from his friends like that. If it was someone he didn't know, maybe, of course, but in that life that happens. But no, I mean, I just think that I've never heard that before, and I felt they wanted to introduce that just to, put something there, I guess, to add a little drama. But that was part of the problem that I had with the first one. It was incomplete, and then you go then into the second episode, and that one's Kill Kill Kill. I don't know what your thoughts were on it, but for me, this was more of the part where they get into the first part of the war between Stanfa and Joey, and they talk about the Ciancaglini brothers. We have Joey Ciancaglini getting shot in the head. We know that. Then Michael Ciancaglini is killed, and Joey Merlino gets wounded, and then they bring up some of these other characters, and I think the main part of it was John Vesey. So what was your thoughts on the second one? Because what I liked, actually, and maybe you could talk about this too, is that you actually in your retrospective on it, which was the second part of your video, you actually played a part of a previous interview with Vesey, and I thought that was good. And then you also brought up some of the issues they had where he was calling the wife, and that, I guess, one of the Ciancaglini brothers' wife, and was threatening him and all that because he wanted vengeance for his brother. But this was way after he had already cooperated and was in the witness protection program.
Yeah, that's there's a lot to look at what you just said in terms of like to just see what VC did in this. Like, I actually think that the stuff that I showed in my little mini documentary at the end was more valid and better of VC. I felt it was more journalistic, and it like you said, I think it gave more of an even depiction of who he was. Whereas in this one, it's like, why are they excluding certain things to just boost his credibility or hide his lack of credibility? And the other one was more journalistic and was trying to paint a more true picture. I mean, the guy is kind of, as you see, like, if you were to look at this one and you say, who's John Vesey? Oh, well, poor John Vesey, they shot him in the head. Well, you don't hear that he was going after, like, Ciancaglini's wife and this and that, and that he's kind of a mad dog. I mean, he's definitely, and then also in the thing that I mentioned, I don't want to give away too much of it, but he has behaviors that are very sociopathic after the fact. And this, once again, we get back to this whole thing of, what do you do to get rats? Who do you have to let in if you want to use rats? It happens most of the time. They're very, very evil, dangerous sociopaths. And that's who you have to, like, you have to make a deal with the devil to get, a big trophy on your wall, like the head of Skinny Joey Merlino.
Yeah. And I agree with you. And then I always look at VC as more of a hitman for hire. And we know that he was offered 10,000 to, kill Ciancaglini, Mikey Chang. And then he never gets the money, that according to him. And then the other other part is you know, I'll give him this. I mean, the guy's definitely he's a tough guy, got balls. I mean, I don't know how he survived. He got shot twice in the head and once in the chest, and had a guy coming at him with a knife, and he's able to, you know, stab the guy and all that. But, you know, there was parts in it also. It just showed how just a crazy guy he was. Like the situation where he had hurt his hand, burned his hand and arm when he set the car on fire, and then the thing was is he was worried the cops would find out, which obviously they would, because, you know, it was part of the local, I forget, it belonged to a friend, car dealership. And what he ended up doing was going home, and his neighbor was outside or something, and then he has an electric grill, and then I guess he catches it on fire and burns his hand or something on it. But the wounds were not electrical wounds. I mean, the wounds were electrical wounds, but it was, you know, it was just really bizarre that, you know, he'd want to burn his arms again, you know, just to try to have an alibi.
It's kind of like Keystone Crooks.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's pretty,
I don't even know if we can believe it, but
it's almost like slapstick. I mean, what you just described is almost like a script from like a Bugs Bunny cartoon or something.
Well, and I really like on your part what George Anastasia said about the guy. You know, basically they didn't believe that the guy changed. You know, so he supposedly found God and all this other stuff, like all of them, and, you know, and he's making these threatening calls and everything. And the feds wouldn't do anything about it.
Yeah, and that's interesting because that was in the parts that I showed in my thing, but that was not echoed in the Netflix thing, which is like, once again, these choices. It's very that, you know, I think that there's a lot of the word that's coming to my mind is manipulative, but the thing is that it's very television. It reminds me of old television, before television. Nowadays, right now, television like HBO and things like this is the modern films. They've been exalted to a much higher level. Back in the day, television was much lower brow and a much lower common denominator, and that's what this felt like. That's why I kind of made a point that, like, you know, this to me is not what the fans of your audience and my audience like. We like the really gritty street shoot 'em up stuff. This was more like a cop procedural from ABC, like Law and Order. And that's very like clear cut lines. You know, I like more complex things. Like I used to love the TV show The Shield, because the bad cop Vic, they always said they wrote him 60% bad, 40% good, and that brings a certain complexity where these procedurals are just very cut and dry. This is the good guy, that's the bad guy, and that's somewhat manipulative. I think that's what they engage in, that with obviously newscasts as well.
Yeah, I felt they really had too many. It was mostly informants and law enforcement that was providing most of the story, and then you did have some with Angelo Lux. That was good. You know, he's not around. He's a friend of Joey's, and I thought that was good. Also, is interesting seeing some of the footage. I hadn't seen some of the footage from back in the day, and man, he was a big guy, wasn't he?
Oh yeah. Big Fat Angelo. They don't call him that for, you know, speed. No, he's a big boy, and he's a good cook, and he's obviously likes to eat.
Yeah. No, that was, but, you know, it's good to see him on there. And then but yeah, it was mostly the cops and the, you know, informants, and they did have George Anastasia. I think Anastasia should have been the one instead of John A. Light being kind of the, you know, the analyst type, you know. I think they could have just given him more time. And of course they had Dave Ratweiser or whatever.
Stratweiser. Yeah. Joey calls him Ratweiser. Joey doesn't like him.
Yeah.
Him and Joey are beefing lately.
Yeah. But, you know, I like Anastasia. He's always got, you know, he has a pretty good pulse.
He's a good writer. He's a
Yeah.
graduate of Dartmouth University. He's
Yeah.
legitimate journalist with the Philadelphia
Oh, yeah.
Inquirer for many years. He's authored many books.
Yeah.
He's a smart guy, and he's also I believe he's from South Philly as well. I think he's from South Philly.
Yeah. I think he's a local guy. Yeah.
Yeah. And no, he's yeah, and Ratweiser rather, Ratweiser. It's funny that Joey doesn't like him. I'm not even exactly sure where that came from, why Joey doesn't like him, but he was a participant in one of Joey's most iconic lines, because he was the guy that interviewed Joey when he said, he framed it as the New York bosses had a contract out on you, which I think is a bit of a mistake within that.
Yeah.
I think it was allegedly Nicky Scarfo that had the contract.
Right.
And he said they have a $500,000 price on your head. And Joey smiles and looks back at the camera and says, $500,000, I'll shoot myself for $500,000.
Yeah.
And that's like, so that is, Joey doesn't like him, but he is kind of somewhat, involved in one of the most iconic lines. And that is really, I mean, that's definitely top 5 iconic lines of Joey Merlino.
Well, my problem with him's more he's kind of like there's a guy, Gerardo Rivera, back in the day that was in New York, and he's one of these guys that is just chases people down, follows them, he just is a pest. And I mean, I think that's what the big problem with him is. I mean, Anastasia, you don't see him doing that. He kind of keeps a little bit of distance, but I think Schrottweiser likes to, he loves following these guys and, trying to talk to them.
Yeah, well, I think, Anastasia, I look at as more of a journalist and writer, whereas Schrottweiser is a straight up like TV commentator. So he's got his microphone. He's chasing Joey. He's actually a pretty large fellow. When you see him standing next to Joey, he's very big. But and I don't know if he's
small though.
Yeah, Joey's very small. But I mean, I don't know if he intimidates or whatever in his travels of sticking microphones in people's faces. But he's not going to intimidate Skinny Joey Merlino. I don't care how big he is.
No.
But that's one thing you said about John Alite too. Back to that a little bit is that it's just a little bit. It's almost that almost says to me that the people that were really calling the shots for this thing just don't know what they're doing. Like, why on earth? Like, I mean, that's okay. So apparently, I believe that John Alite claims that he had some stuff. Basically, was kind of sent maybe to carry a message from he was in with John Gotti Jr. and he was sent to Philly to maybe convey a message. And then one of the things he would always do to make money is he'd have like parking concessions, run the valet at like clubs. And I believe John Alite claims that I think Joey hooked him up with a parking concession, or somebody hooked him up on Delaware Avenue by the water where they used to have all the nightclubs that Joey would hang out at. So I think I guarantee that was never substantiated by Skinny Joey Merlino. That's what John Alite has said. And, it's funny. I also note in my thing about, and I've talked about this before, of course, Joey Merlino's like biggest internet nemesis currently is Gene Borello, and John Alite and Gene Borello had a show called The John and Gene Show. And when they were, Gene's not on that show anymore. Gene's kind of doing his own thing now with his own channel. But when he was on that show, I remember I heard like at a time, like Gene was always trying to down Joey forever. He's been downing Joey. But I remember Alite would kind of get Joey's back, and he'd be like, take the other side and say, no, Joey's he's a real one, man. I'm not gonna co-sign anything you're saying because he is legit. And that's interesting that he at least is, not going to down Joey like that. But I think if you would ask Joey what he thinks about John Alite, he'd be like, effing rat. I don't think he did.
Well, I thought though that he kind of gave some hyperbole as well. He was saying that the mob in Philly was 10 times as tough as the mob in New York. I don't know. I mean, they had some wars too. New York had the Colombo Wars. They had stuff with a lot of killings. So I mean, both of them were tough at one point, but definitely a lot tougher than today. But he had to kind of show off for the camera, I think.
Right. When you say hyperbole, but you also, this also once comes back around to the kind of manipulative kind of place you come from. He's like, he's obviously, he's been paid to come
Yeah.
and talk about the Philly Mafia. So that's a
Yeah.
comment that would just like kind of, I don't want to say gild the lily, but it's like, that's like, obviously, sure, Philly's tough, but I mean, New York has a long history of all kinds of things. So that's just, that kind of shows that this thing is just, it's, what, there's a lot of things about it that I can criticize. It's fluff. There's a lot of fluff.
Yeah,
There's not a lot of
that's a
substance.
good point.
Yeah. And also, I just also noticed like a lot of repetition. Like,
Yeah.
when we're talking about this in terms of the 3 different episodes, and that's how I did
Yeah.
it too. But to be honest with you, it's more just a mix. And I think that they kind of blend together a little bit more. And there's just a lot of repetition in it. But that's very characteristic of old TV because, you say something and then you cut to commercial. And then when you come back, you repeat what you already said. So
Yeah.
these are these like kind of TV formulas.
Yeah, and even if you look at the time, it was, today a 60-minute television show with commercials. I mean, before commercials is 42 minutes. You always have
Right.
18 minutes of commercial, and that was about the timing for one of them. Let's see, 42 minutes, 48, and 47 minutes. So pretty much they built each episode be kind of that TV formula, to be honest, like you said.
Well, that's the new hardcore streaming format that I'm seeing over and over again. It's 3-episode docuseries, and they're all about this long. So this is similar. If you look at it, it's very, very similar to the traditional hour-long TV show. And that is really solidifying. You see that across the board, Amazon Prime and other streamers, and you see that happening. So that's kind of the new way. And I think that's kind of also indicative of our shrinking attention spans.
Yeah, exactly. We don't have I remember before you had some of these that were, 5, 6 episodes, and so you don't do that anymore. I mean,
well, this is number 1 on Netflix right now. Number 1 on Netflix. Yep. And it's really, I mean, as I spoke about in the thing, it's like, this is really boosting Joey's profile from, somewhat, a kind of a regional folk hero in the tri-state area to a, huge international profile. And that's happening. I mean, really, that's going to be happening very quickly. It's probably going to be happening within the next like several weeks.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so I guess just a couple of things on the 3rd episode. I thought that the part that was interesting to me was, and so this was kind of I don't know why their focus was on this, because they were talking about basically the drugs, and they were trying to get this RICO case on Joey, the first one, and so a lot of it, about half of it's on Bobby Luisi and what happened in Boston, and also it was a lot with Ron Previat, and so they were showing them together. There was a 3-way conversation with Joey Merlino and a lot of stuff. It was, and I'd never seen the footage or heard this before. So there was some new surveillance from all of this. But I mean, what it kind of proved to me, especially when you heard Joey speak in the 3-way phone conversation, he didn't say anything regarding, doing anything with drugs. And so, they had a very flimsy case on Joey, just if when you look at what they put in the show,
right,
in the documentary.
Yeah, I mean, that's like, it's this interesting thing about that is, because they didn't get him on attempted murder, they didn't get him on murder, they didn't get him on drugs, and they got him on racketeering, and that's a subtle thing. And that's this. I think that was well illustrated though about how these cases are. The word subtle, or is it just like air? I mean, there's nothing there. And then like, even, I mean, who I can't remember who it was. Was it, I think it was their undercover FBI agent who said the kilos of the white powder, I don't want to get demonetized, so I won't say the actual name. The kilos had 215, the old Philadelphia area code, written on them. And it's like, and he's like, that's basically a signature from Joey Merlino. I'm like, if Joey Merlino, if it's a signature of Joey Merlino, he actually has a signature. why in the hell would the numbers 215 be a signature, quote signature? That just goes to show how, like we have a lot of topics coming up, how thin this stuff is and the rats
Yeah.
that get involved. And it's just
Yeah.
like, man, that the government really, they don't do things a lot of times where it's like, it's just very obvious and logical, because it didn't seem that way at all.
Well, things get real personal. Number one, number two, what it is that the government really, FBI really loves these organized crime cases, because that's what they can use to, one, get publicity with the public, and two, that's how they can go back to Congress and get more money. So they always want to have these mob cases, because the public's interested in that, and it's good PR for them. But the other problem is that if you win, if you beat them, they don't like that. They're going to come back and come back and come back. Look what they've done to Joey. Look what they've done to, John Gotti Jr. They did to John Gotti. They do it. They're going to keep on until they can put the person away,
Yeah. Yep. That's true. They have grudges, and that's interesting. It's very interesting. But yeah, that was on full display here.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, what would your overall rating be? Or would you recommend it? Not recommended? What would you say?
It's tough, because I'm so and like, you and I are both so familiar with the material.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's hard to, it's definitely elementary. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So it's like, so I don't know how it is to be approaching this material from an elementary perspective, because I approached this material from an elementary perspective back when I was a kid.
Yeah.
When I first learned of it. And so in some senses, I don't know. I think I think I can still separate everything. And I can say that it's okay. Obviously, as I mentioned, it has a very large budget. It looks very nice.
Yeah.
Its cinematography is gorgeous.
Yeah.
Just the whole marketing campaign is gorgeous. The editing's amazing. The cinematography is wonderful. The sound design's great. Da 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 da. It's well crafted.
Yeah.
But I just have to say that I just overall, I mean, if I had to give, let me think of a rating between 1 and 10, I'd probably give it a 5.5. And that's a pretty low rating.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just think there's such a hunger for this kind of stuff. But,
Yeah.
If I had put this together, it would have been a lot better.
Yeah. Well, I like what you put together for your retrospective on it, where you actually put some context around everything. And so I'd probably give it a 6 myself. I mean, the first one was really bad. Probably a 3 or 4. The second one, the highlight probably was the VC conversation. But again, it was, like you said, manipulative. And then the only reason the third one's a little bit more is just I saw a little more like, I guess, surveillance and that type of thing that I hadn't seen before. But I mean, for someone that doesn't know much about the mob, or they're just now hearing about Joey Merlino, I guess it might be a pretty okay place to start. But you're not going to get a lot of meat in this documentary.
Yeah, you know what I was thinking about? I was thinking about this, and when I was a kid, and I would get into a band that I liked, a rock and roll band that I would like, say, like, for instance, I could throw out a name, Jimi Hendrix. I love Jimi Hendrix, and when I was a kid, or the Grateful Dead or whatever, let's say Jimi Hendrix. I remember I started off with a greatest hits compilation. And then you go to the deeper albums where you can get more into the deeper cuts. To me, this is like a starter kit, an introductory kind of greatest hits compilation, but there's much, much more deeper to go. And that's what I tried to kind of touch on in the documentary that I put together, and that's how I look at it. And, I think I could agree to be reasonable, and I think I could compromise and go up to a 6. And then we can be unified and we can say 6.
Yeah. Yeah. No, but I thought you did. No, you did good on it. And so, I recommend everyone go over to your YouTube channel, which, you're displaying it there, youtube.com @Billy Luna. And so I really encourage everyone. You do such great production with your videos.
Thank you.
And just a couple of other questions, kind of related to, well, it's about Joey Merlino, but what's your thoughts on that of, with Joey and, what he's doing business wise?
Well, it's interesting. There's a lot to unpack there. And in terms of, like, I agree with you in many respects. Now, one thing I will say is that I like show business, and I'm developing a lot of show business stuff, but I'll tell you where the real money is. I will tell you, show business is a lot of fun. The real money is in business.
Yeah.
And so Joey is on a very business trajectory right now with his cheesesteak shops, because that is, I mean, it's interesting. You think, how much money can you make from a cheesesteak shop? A lot.
Mhm.
And so that is doing phenomenally well. And that's just going to continue to do well. And that's, show business is somewhat fickle and there's a pendulum, whereas business is more predictable. And
Yeah.
so that's one of the reasons, because like Sammy is just doing show business. He's not doing business now.
Right.
Now, like, but on the other side of it, Sammy, that deal that you're talking about, that was it, not just a deal. That was a mega deal. That was
Yeah. Multi-year series,
Yeah, that was Terrence Winter, was one of the writers on The Sopranos. Was he the creator of Tulsa with Sly Stallone? I don't know if he was the creator, but he was on that too. And I mean, when you talk about a main writer on The Sopranos, and then Boardwalk Empire he did. I mean, what a pedigree. That guy is huge. I mean, that is a major guy. Then the director that was put on it, I think he was also acting as an executive producer, was Antoine Fuqua, who was the director of the movie Training Day with Denzel Washington, who he won an Academy Award for that. I mean, I can't remember who else was on the project, but you're talking about like blue chip. You don't see that, man. I mean, you really have something teed up. And then, I mean, you look at Sammy's background. I mean, Sammy is who he is, and we can make judgments about who he is as a person. However, he's a pretty big name in that book.
Yeah.
Underboss, about him, is probably one of the best-selling true crime books of all time. And so you put all that together, and you're talking about a monster project. I mean, you don't usually get like an Anton Fuqua and a Terrence Winter on the same project. And so really, to let that all go away. But I kind of knew that was happening. A bunch of people did know that for a while. And, it's because the thing is, you could just look at it and know that, like, the thing about, when you have a major deal with a network, FX, owned by Fox, basically kind of working with Disney, you got to look at it, and they have like different kind of optics. Like, you can do what you want on YouTube, but when you talk about studios and networks, they have a lot of optics. And eventually, once it comes out, you killed an innocent 16-year-old kid. They frown on that. It's harder to get that, because this is like major. I mean, when you talk about a project like that, you're risking tens of millions of dollars, and they take that very seriously. So you kind of knew that might happen, but that's, I think he did get a payday. What did he get? I think Sammy walked with 100 G's or something between him and his partner.
I'm not sure exactly, but heard he got something. And so I think part of it too is that he wanted to have all this creative control, and that's not going to happen with studios when that's risk. They don't want risk. They want the story. They want the name and likeness. But also, Sammy, unfortunately for him, is his name's toxic. So the thing is that you can get someone like a Michael Francis or a Joey Merlino, and they actually are likable. They have some charisma. I mean, Sammy can have charisma, but the thing is, the public's not going to accept a Sammy Gravano with the way that he approaches things, but they accept more of a refined person like Joey, or someone like
Michael. Yeah. I mean, the thing is that, yes, correct. Yes, Sammy is more unpalatable. He's more unsavory. He's I mean, God knows, we're not dealing with choir boys here in any way, shape, or form or with any of
Right.
these guys. However, one thing you mentioned though is creative control, and that's a thing that I've, for a long time I've dealt with a lot of figures, alleged organized crime figures, and I've tried to get projects together. When I was very young, I was sitting in Barry Slotnick's office, the major, you know, mob lawyer in New York,
Yeah.
and we were sitting with Anthony Colombo, Joe Colombo's son, and we were
Yeah.
negotiating the life rights for the Joe Colombo story. This is way back in the day when I was a kid, and I actually put the whole thing together with a big producer here. And but Anthony Colombo, I remember that day he was like, "Well, listen, we were going to do my father's thing, and I don't want it. We can't be some kind of cowboy shoot 'em up thing." And I was with a pretty major producer at the time, and he's like, "Yeah, no worries." And I said to him when he left, I said, "George, what do you mean? This project is gonna be a pretty shoot 'em up, mafia thing." And George said, don't worry, just tell him anything." And I was, at the time, this was a long time ago, I told George, I said, "George, we're not in Beverly Hills right now." I mean, obviously now it's, the whole thing's a shadow of its former self, but I think that the idea of, and it's not just, someone who's an alleged organized crime figure. I think when you go into Hollywood, you're not getting creative control unless your name is like Tom Cruise, or
Exactly.
it's just that's just too much of a risk, because they own everything, and I mean, not to mention, if say Sammy the Bull Gravano, that guy, that little guy, I mean, what does he know about making a movie?
Right.
And you see movies where people are given too much creative control, and it hurts the project because they're
Yeah.
too close to it. They're too interested in looking good, when you have to understand that, to really pull people's heartstrings and move emotion, you've got to
Yeah.
show them the real person, warts and all, and they're going to identify with you even more. It's like, the movie Elvis was done with a lot of participation from the Elvis estate, his daughter, Priscilla Presley. And, the one thing, I mean, I love the story of Elvis. I'm fascinated by it. The movie was okay, but what it lacked was, Elvis, I mean, and this is just the reality of it. Elvis sleeping with a ton of other women, Elvis doing a ton of drugs, Elvis with insane amounts of handguns everywhere. You saw that a teensy little bit, but there was like, I mean, he kissed a woman once. He did maybe a pill or two. I mean, but in the reality of it, which is part of Elvis's story, there was a massive amount of women. There was a massive amount of drugs. There was a massive amount. Elvis would walk with like 5 handguns on him, and it's like, that's, so therefore, when you get the family involved and you want to sanitize it, it hurts the project. So there's a lot of reasons for that. Not letting people have creative control.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get it, period. I mean, here's the deal. If you want to go and you want to take your money and you want to put up $50 million of your own money, sure. But the studio is going to be like, this is our $50 million. We're not going to let you do that. You go get your own 50 and play around. But, and the other thing is, they know what they're doing most of the time better than a subject of a biography.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're right on that. And so I guess the last question is, so Joey's going to be, I mean, I guess the skinny Joey Merlino cheesesteak, they're opening up a new location, right?
Right. In Delco, Delaware County.
And when's that happening?
I think that they're trying to get it within the next 6 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are they looking at franchising this later, more locations, or?
Yeah, there's definitely going to be more locations. I'm not sure exactly what the format is going to be in terms of that, but there's a lot of interest in locations. They're contacted on an almost daily basis with people from all over the world wanting to do it. And I would assume that with this raise in his profile to an international level, that's not going to abate at all, and that's just going to increase.
Yeah, I just think it's going to. My prediction is his profile is going to continue to grow. His brand's going to grow. He's going to be like Michael Francis. He's about the only other one that's really done, made a lot of money legitimately. And so I think for Joey, this is good. It kind of proves that he's got a brand where he can, make the type of money that he needs for his lifestyle. And he also had, he treated his, he still has a lot of his friends from back in South Philly. He, going back to growing up in South Philly, and a lot of investors that are willing, that believe in him. You know, that's something that Sammy didn't have, was a lot of investors willing to support him. And also, you know, Sammy ended up killing his friends. He didn't, you know, he didn't really have friends from back in the day like Joey. You know, Joey had a lot of friends from back in the day, and they're still around in his life and his circle.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, he's beloved. That's another thing I touched on in my thing, is just that we had kind of touched about this earlier, but the title of that Netflix thing was uh Philadelphia versus the Mafia. And it's
Hmm.
like, what are you talking about, Philadelphia versus the Mafia? First of all, the prosecutions are all federal. And if you want to talk about Philadelphia versus, the Mafia, or who's alleged to be in the Mafia, in this case, Skinny Joey Merlino, if that's who they're alleging in this, that guy he's a folk hero in the streets of
Yeah.
Philadelphia. There's no Philly versus him. He is Philadelphia. And yeah, and you look at his buddies that came up with him from South Philly are still his tight friends. And that's it's another interesting contrast. You look at Sammy the Bull, like, who's riding with him from the old days?
Right.
He's having, making eating omelets with Jimmy Calandra. He didn't know Jimmy Calandra. That's just like, it's like, what's the common denominator? It's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, that was the major point that, you know, I wanted to make in that video, and I just wanted to get your thoughts. So that's really good. So, is there anything that you want to? How can people contact you? You know, anything in closing that you'd like to say? You know, because I think you're doing a great job, and you know, I just want people to go over and subscribe to you and watch. You've got a good library that you've built up, and you're continuing to add
Yeah.
to it.
Yeah. I would welcome everyone to come and come over to the Billy Luna channel and check it out. If you like Joey Merlino, I've got quite a bit, and I kind of come at it from, I think, a more inside perspective than a lot of people. And yeah, I've got some good stuff, and I think the same thing with your stuff. It's like you're one of the you're the guy that I think of as like the real hardcore historian that's really laying down the facts, and I greatly appreciate what you do, and I appreciate
Yeah.
you having me on.
Yeah, of course, and you're welcome anytime. And so we'll go ahead and close the interview. But you know, everyone, just check out Billy Luna's YouTube channel, and you know, I know you're not going to be disappointed. Billy, thank you for coming on with me today.
Absolutely, my pleasure, James. It's great speaking with you again. You be well, my friend.
Yep, thank you. Take care now.
Take care.